The complete name of Titanic is RMS Titanic or Royal Mail Ship Titanic. RMS is the prefix that was used for seagoing vessels that carry mail under contract to the British Royal Mail. It was considered a sign of prestige since it meant the ships kept their time. The word Titanic was derived from the Titans in Greek mythology. The Titanic was owned by the company White Star Line, and it was made in the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, Ireland. It took 2 years for building the Titanic. This is an image from that shipyard, and here we can see the Titanic in the background. A close-up view of the Titanic under construction. This is Thomas Andrews, who was the chief naval architect of the shipyard as well as of the Titanic. The Titanic was 269.06 meters long, and it was a floating luxurious hotel, and it had an electric plant. The electric plant of the Titanic had the capacity to produce more electricity than a modern city of those times, and it had a capacity for 3,547 passengers and crew. Images from inside the Titanic. This was the gymnasium inside the Titanic, and this was a Turkish bath. The captain of the Titanic was Captain Edward Smith. Unfortunately, Captain Edward Smith, as well as Thomas Andrews, about whom we had discussed before, drowned on that unfortunate day. This is the Titanic starting its journey on 10th April 1912 from Southampton in Great Britain. A video of the same. The Titanic carried some of the wealthiest people in the world of those days. The person we are seeing here, John Jacob Astor, was one of the richest people in the world at that time, and he was also the richest person to be in the Titanic. Unfortunately, he died that day. The Titanic also carried poor immigrants from Britain as well as rest of Europe. In all, it had about 2,224 passengers and 885 crew on that fateful maiden journey. The Titanic actually received warnings of drifting ice, but the captain ignored as it was thought that ice did not pose much danger to larger ships, and they went in high speeds to keep time, as keeping time was a matter of prestige. On 14th April 1912, it was noticed that the ship was going directly head-on towards an iceberg. And this iceberg is actually thought to be the very iceberg that the Titanic hit on. And it was photographed by a person from another ship which traveled through that area the other day. On seeing that the ship was going straight towards the iceberg, orders were given to steer the ship around the iceberg. But unfortunately, this did not really help, and the Titanic hit its sides on the iceberg, and this caused 5 out of its 16 watertight compartments to open and flood. The Titanic had the technology to survive up to 4 of its watertight compartments flooding. Unfortunately, 5 of it flooded. The ship had the capacity to carry 64 lifeboats, which could carry 4,000 people, but it had only 20 lifeboats, which could carry around 1,178 people. Unfortunately, the crew was not trained properly. Only 705 to 710 people were saved. This was because most of the lifeboats only filled to half or less than half of their capacity. The reasons being that the poor training of the crew. Another factor was that there were strict orders that women and children has to be first. So this caused a lot of time to be wasted to segregate women and children. Another thing was, as soon as some of the lifeboats were half filled, they went away from the area, fearing that more people will come in and will drown all of them. Most of those lifeboats did not come back and pick up more survivors. Only 2 of them came back to help and carry more people out. Around 1,500 to 1,635 lives were lost that day. The numbers are not exact because it is not really known how many people exactly boarded the Titanic, since many people canceled the trip on the last minute. At around 2:10 to 2:20 a.m., the ship broke into two and sank. This is the route map of the Titanic, starting from Southampton, touching France, then Queenstown, and that is the area where it hit the iceberg and sank. the papers on the next day showing news about the sinking of the Titanic. In 1985, the remains of the Titanic was discovered and it was found to be 3.7 kilometers under the ocean. So that is the tragic story of the Titanic.